Listen to the 48 Hours podcast for shocking murder cases and compelling real-life dramas from one of television's most watched true crime shows. Go behind the scenes of each episode with award-winning CBS News correspondents and producers in Postmortem, a weekly deep dive. Listen to 48 Hours wherever you get your podcasts.
Girl, real talk. This whole "it's a new year, time to reinvent myself" trash is not the vibe for 2024. You can find someone who loves you for you, as you are. You don't need to read a stack of self-help books, only eat sad salads, or start meditating at 5 a.m. to be ready for dating. So yeah, my advice is to download Bumble and find someone who embraces you the way you are right now. Let me know how it goes.
A note to listeners. The following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised.
The fact that she was able to go into such specific detail about absolutely everything from start to finish pertaining to what she saw, what she heard, even to what she smelt at certain times was very, very graphic. You're talking about meth now. You can do meth one time, let's say 15 years ago, and it could still affect the polygraph that you take tomorrow because it chemically messes with the brain and the area of the brain that I'm measuring whether or not something is telling the truth or someone's telling a lie.
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman.
When this case is finally solved, there will be a lot of discussion as to why it took so long. And hopefully we'll learn what went wrong and why. That is why whenever we can, we invite experts in the crime and legal field to come on the podcast to help search for context and answers to the difficult questions in this case.
In episode 20, The Photos, we released a recording of an interview that was done by the private detectives hired by Paula of a potential witness who said she saw photos of what she believed was Molly's dead remains. She also said that she was held against her will when some individuals discovered she saw something that she wasn't supposed to see.
As we said earlier, law enforcement is aware of the recordings and have seen them. According to our sources, law enforcement did check out the location of where this happened and did not find anything to help the case. There was also discussion about why this person gave this statement and whether or not she was making it all up.
We sent this recording out to several law enforcement people to get their opinion on the video, and all of them felt this person was credible.
We also sent it to Lisa Ribicoff, a licensed polygrapher, and she's here today to tell us what she thinks.
We have Lisa Ribicoff on the phone again, and Lisa was nice enough to take a look at the video of one of the witnesses that was done with Paula's private investigator, an early witness, pretty soon after Molly and Colt. Is that correct, Sam?
Yeah.
And you were able to take a look at that video. Normally, the last couple things we sent you, or last thing we sent you was like an audio tape, but you got to see and both hear what this witness said, who we have not mentioned her name, not mentioned anything about her. Can you tell us a little bit what your thoughts were when you watched that video and listened to what she had to say?
Yeah, so I will tell you both this, that I thought it was pretty heart-wrenching just to listen to the audio clip the last time you had sent that over to me for an analysis. But to go ahead and actually hear the words that are coming out of someone's mouth, in addition to watching their micro expressions and just seeing their facial reactions in response to the questions and describing this, it was, heartbreaking is not even the right word. The fact that she was able to go into such specific detail about absolutely everything from start to finish pertaining to what she saw, what she heard, even to what she smelt at certain times was very, very graphic. I know that from what she described and things that she did see and observe, I've seen some of those things before in other cases that I've worked on, and I will tell you that it's definitely not something that, as an investigator or even a witness, it's not something that you can clearly forget. And so I do feel the pain and the grief that this is something that she's going to have to carry for a little bit of time, and definitely there's trauma exposed because of what she's seen and she had to experience. But it's more so on a sense of grief, distraught, and not being able to cope and adjust to what she did observe when she did observe it.
Yeah, because it wasn't only she just observed stuff. She also was subjected to being held there and
I would
against
say
her will.
captive and even tortured. I think those are the two words that I would use to describe the situation.
I mean, when I first saw it, I felt the same way, Lisa. I was just overwhelmed by this woman, and there was no way that I felt that she was fabricating any part of what she was saying. It was so deeply, like, it was guttural, the way she was talking.
Oh, yeah. You can watch it. You can see the fact that at certain points, she's having issues pertaining to keeping her emotions in check because she wants to be able to convey all of the information she has appropriately and effectively without letting her emotions get to the best of her. But you hear and you see the pain in her eyes. She's clutching her own body and holding on to it for support and comfort because she doesn't have anyone in the room with her as like an emotional support human, if you want to call it that, to assist with the interview and be someone she can rely on for comfort. So she's been already subjected, tortured throughout this entire experience. Physically, now she's dealing with mental, and then she's being interviewed, and it's really re-traumatization of the victim. Because yes, she's not Molly, but she is a victim in this. So having to discuss it over and over, it's re-traumatizing her.
The other thing that we found interesting is because after we aired that, there had been some people behind the scenes said that she made it up and that there was a reason why she made it up. And so I'm not going to go into the details of why, but they didn't feel that she was, at least law enforcement. And I don't think law enforcement actually, they saw the videotape, but I don't think they re-interviewed her at all. I could be wrong about that, but they said that she made it up to kind of cover a story that she was trying to cover up personally. And when I look at that, and when you looked at that, and Cindy looked at that, and other people looked at it, because I've had other law enforcement people look at it too, and they felt it was credible as well. She's got to be a really good actress.
Oh, yeah. When it comes down to credibility, if she was in front of me and let's say I was administering a forensic interview as a witness and trying to ascertain details pertaining to the situation, I would not deem her as not credible at all. Like, she's 100% credible. I would consider her to be an expert witness and an ideal candidate to testify in a courtroom on the basis of her physiologically and how she presented visually, as well as speech, body language, micro expressions. And even the level of detail that she provided, it's not something that can just be shot off the cuff. Because when you're an actress, yes, there's a script, but you have to go ahead and give a little bit extra to go ahead and sell yourself, per se. She doesn't need to sell herself because everything is concrete to her.
Yeah, so to me, that definitely was not a technique. She was authentic. I mean, that was real emotion. That wasn't fake. And then the story that they're saying that she was covering up, it makes no sense. I mean, it's such a thin story to me that you would just discredit this person with this amount of detail. The smelling part, Lisa, what did you think of that? Because that was very disturbing for me.
I think the most disturbing thing for me was the visualization that I got of when she was being tortured and what exactly was going on. To the fact that she even was able to say, like, it was a blue funnel. And she was able to describe the Tupperware pitcher that it was. And even go ahead and give all of these names of these other individuals. Whereas if she was acting, and it wasn't authentic, she wouldn't have been able to go ahead and even provide like the spelling of these names or the people in general. But for the visualization part for me of that other party that was in the room when she was being tortured, and when she said that someone was putting their fingers down her throat just to make her get sick so she wouldn't ingest whatever was in there, like, that was graphic for me. Mm-hmm. That was just heartbreaking that there was someone else in the room that was on her side but was enabled to be there for some sort of reason, whatever they had over his head. But he felt enough guilt and remorse to have to shove his fingers down her throat.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, they did go and check out this place where she said that she was, and I think she did provide the memory cards, but unfortunately, there was no pictures on there. I don't know what the details on how she was able to go back and get them. And I don't know what the time frame was from when she left that place, escaped from that place, or got help escape from that place. And then when law enforcement went and checked this out, we don't know these details. I'm guessing it wasn't right away because this information her interview was done weeks after. And then how long it took them to observe the videotape and go check this out. So I don't know. And so they discredit her because of those two things, that they went to the place and the memory card she had apparently, and this is all third-party information told to us, some from law enforcement, some from other people. So we don't really know, but they discredited her pretty quickly after that.
I don't think that's appropriate on the part of law enforcement. I mean, I've discussed with you guys my thought process about how this has been handled the entire time, and I found plenty of faults of my own. I mean, I've been a private investigator now for almost 20 years and a polygraph examiner for almost 12 years. So I've got a lot of experience pertaining to the difference between an interview and interrogation and how to effectively carry out a proper investigation and understanding the importance of a timeline of an investigation. Obviously, I'm part of law enforcement. If nothing is said to them, they can't do anything about it. If it's not reported, then technically there is no crime and they don't even know that there's a crime going on. So they can't follow through with something that they don't even know is actually going on. The big thing for me, I know I would be interested in, is whether or not she sought medical treatment after she had been gone for 48 hours. Because the big thing for me is that if they had her drinking whatever substance this was, or they were pouring it into her mouth, and that they were threatening her and telling her all of these things that they were going to do to her what they did to Molly, that obviously, and pills were involved, toxicology will tell us what type of pills they were. I mean, some of these people that are involved aren't the sharpest tools in the shed and are not really educated. So they could have been giving her cough medicine, or they could have been giving her something like Advil, like excessive amounts, or it could have been something stronger. But until we actually know, that's kind of difficult to see the extent of what they were trying to maybe poison or kill her with.
Yeah, we don't know any of that, unfortunately. We just know what she has said in that videotape, and that and it sounded like she got out of there pretty quickly, and that the place where she was doing the interview, she had already moved out of the state. So,
yes.
So that's the thing that makes me kind of confused on why they wouldn't take her more seriously, is because she was running for her life.
Literally, because they attacked her mom's house. She had everything ransacked, all of her stuff was taken, and she literally had absolutely nothing. And again, she has her son, and she needed to do what was in the best interest for her son. But at the same time, there needs to be possibly another interview done, because this interview was done a while ago. Maybe additional contact has to be made with her and just say, hey, listen, like, we understand that you had spoken with another investigator however long ago. I don't necessarily want to go back and rehash that interview, but you by any chance have any additional details that maybe you remember now? Anything pertaining to something that you may have heard since you have left? Has anyone tried making contact with you? Like, is there anything that you think that might be helpful for the investigation that's still ongoing now?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think she's worth talking to again. I don't know if they will. I think that's been the problem with this investigation from the get-go, is that they haven't really followed up on some of these leads to the degree that I think everybody realizes that they need to. I mean, I don't know anymore. I mean, it seems like it's passive to a degree. I know they're working on stuff because we hear about it. They're working on it and trying to get information, but it's confusing. And then when you have, what was really interesting about her testimony is that it was pretty soon after they went missing. So it's not like coming like the eyewitness who you listened to before. It was like that recording happened like a year and a half ago. So it's pretty late in the game, but it was still very detail oriented. And he had already also told it to the FBI and local law enforcement at the same time.
But this person was very soon after, and I think she was so traumatized you could still see it because it just happened. I think with time, people are able to kind of put a mask on a little bit more, but because it was so raw, it's just shocking to me that they didn't take this seriously. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around it. It doesn't make sense to me because the excuse they gave didn't work for us.
What excuse did they give you guys?
They later said that she made this story up to cover for some actions that she did, and that they went and spoke to her mother, and her mother said she makes up stuff all the time, that they went and checked out the house and there was nothing there. But we don't know how long after this happens, but there's logic.
I was going to say time period. Like, you don't know the timeline.
No.
You don't know how soon everything was. And obviously, if the house is going to get ransacked, I know me. I mean, I've got OCD. The first thing I would be doing is cleaning up absolutely everything, because it would drive me insane having my house a wreck.
And the whole mother saying that she makes stuff up, the mother still lives in that area. If it was my kid, I would have said that too, just to protect them.
Oh, absolutely. You have to say what you need to do to survive. It's survival of the fittest in this situation. So you need to do what you need to do to make sure that you don't end up next. And that's what she did. She went ahead and she removed herself from the situation, from the area. She took her son, she left. And I would have done the same exact thing. I can't fault her for trying to protect her family. Absolutely not.
No. And the fact that why would you inject yourself into a double homicide and murder investigation where your life was threatened or put in jeopardy and make up a story like this? That's what I don't understand. To me, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't. From what she stated that she observed in the photographs, and again, she said that there were dozens of them. I don't know what the right word I'm looking for is. I guess the composition of the body and what she described indicates that obviously rigor mortis had happened, and that there was enough time to have gone by for decomp and things to happen to the body that had already happened from what she observed in the photographs. So obviously the individual that took the photographs was not necessarily, I mean, we can't go ahead and say, hey, this is the person that went ahead and did it, that did the initial crime, but obviously had knowledge of whatever the situation was to go ahead and document it along the way. Now, we don't know what the photographs looked like. We don't know how many there were. And we don't know if this person had gone back and taken photographs over a period of time. Where is this first set of photographs? Was there another set of photographs beforehand? Did they go back and continue to, I guess, document the disposal and or decomposition of the body? We don't know, but I can tell you from what she described already in that video statement was that there's enough period of time for decomp to have gone and happened.
That's my other question, Lisa. Like for the for me, for example, a normal person who doesn't have experience looking at dead bodies, would this person have been able to describe it in detail like that had they not seen that picture?
No, because when you have a corpse or a dead body, on the basis of the facial features, and it also has to do with preservation of the body with regards to, let's say, mummification, and or if, let's say, they were wrapped in a carpet, you have an issue pertaining to fibers, you have an issue pertaining to even temperature of where the body is stored, depending upon the level of heat, and also like infestation pertaining to bugs, animals, and wildlife. So there's different variables that go into it pertaining to decomp and what exactly can accelerate decomp versus slow down decomp.
And this was the summer. This was the middle of the summer, and it was hot, and it was a drought in that area.
Exactly. Temperature alone, it will go ahead and increase the rate of decomp.
That woman giving her statement, how would she know what it would look like in such detail if she didn't see it?
Exactly. You can't it's not like she went ahead and Googled all of these factors and be able to describe the shape of the face, the coloring, texture. I mean, there's too many things that are not made. Listen, if she's got a hobby of true crime and she wants to go ahead and do a deep dive into corpse and dead bodies and like the embalming process and things like that pertaining to death, knock yourself out. But she doesn't appear to be that type of person from what we all have knowledge of. Therefore, the graphic detail of what she described can only indicate that she actually observed what she saw.
And then some of the descriptions kind of, and just based upon my knowledge of hearing it, because there was talk of them trying to pour caustic acid on her and to dissolve the body. We don't know if that happened, but is there anything there that could have accelerated some of the decomp? Would that have accelerated some of the decomp?
Acid can increase decomp, but there's different types of acid. So the acid is going to go ahead and obviously cause the burn to the skin into the flesh, but it necessarily won't penetrate bone unless like specific types of acids are used. So it comes down to chemical compounds and chemical formulas of the solutions themselves. But if we don't have that knowledge, we can't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've consulted, obviously, other law enforcement people who've seen decomp bodies. Mm-hmm. And they said the same thing that you did. They said that it's pretty on point what she's seen and what she described. So it's a baffling thing. It's interesting that it came from the investigators that Paula hired months afterwards to look into this. And my question to you is, why would someone give a statement like that on videotape if it was bullshit and it was just trying to cover a story of something that is pretty minimal in someone's life?
The first thing that I can think of, and again, I'll speak to you as a polygraph examiner now from the perception of why would someone lie to the severity that there is, and given the circumstances of possibility of her lying and fabricating this entire story. And the main reason people lie is because they need to protect themselves or they need to protect someone else. In this situation, the only reason for her to lie is that she actually knew who did the crime. and she was trying to protect them, or there was other information that she knew that could not get leaked. So it's almost like, you want this, but I'm going to give you this instead. It's like a negotiation tactic almost. And it's the same way where someone will get convicted of a crime. So hypothetically speaking, you've got like 5 people that are accused of a bank robbery, but you have the getaway driver, 3 shooters, and then the one that actually shot, let's say, the security officer in the bank. Well, the getaway driver says, hey, listen, yeah, I drove the getaway car, but I didn't actually shoot the guard and kill him. Don't charge me with murder. So he wants to go ahead and, let's say, take a polygraph test or agree to testify in court, stating the fact that, yeah, he participated, but not to the extent of everyone else. So it's a give and a take pertaining to negotiations where he wants to go ahead and pretty much spill the beans and take a plea deal. We don't know what was going on in her life. We don't know if there's any other cases that were going on with her personally or what the family situation was. I don't believe that she went ahead and used this as a tool to negotiate and or lie to cover up for anything else. Because if she did not feel that the information she has was pertinent enough, I don't think that she would have gone ahead and cooperated and sat for the interview. Because again, the video clip that I saw was just a segment of day 2 of an interview. They had already sat down the day before and ironed out a ton of other stuff. So if she did not want to cooperate, A, she would not have met with him again, and B, she wouldn't have met with him at all.
So the sheriff said that this woman gave this testimony in order to alleviate a personal issue. We're not going to say what that personal issue is. And what do you think about that? Would you think that someone would make up a story like this in order to alleviate a personal issue?
I've seen it happen all the time. I mean, I had a polygraph this morning with a client that did something similar, not to the severity of this situation, but yes, people are going to go ahead and say what they need to say to protect themselves and protect people around them. However, given the significant nature of this situation at hand in comparison to whatever personal problem, situation, whatever was going on in that person's in the witness's life, if we'll just refer to her as the witness because she did observe the photographs, that you can't compare apples and oranges. And especially to the severity of the detail that she provided. Usually people will go ahead and embellish sometimes on stories and provide additional details. And the common thing with regards to lying and deception is that if it's too good to be true, or if it just sounds too good, sometimes it's not correct. And you really can't believe everything that you hear the first time around. But this situation, because of the graphic nature, because of what was observed, what she was able to recall, there's no way deception is present in anything that she had said, taking a look at it from a forensic interview standpoint. You can't compare a personal problem that someone is having in their life, which she could have been having going on in her life, to the grand scheme of everything.
Yeah, and I think from a law enforcement's perspective, because it really didn't move the ball forward for them at all, because all it is someone who sees something after the fact and pictures and stuff like that. And it doesn't, I don't know if they've investigated the names that the people that she said to. Obviously, we didn't reveal any of those, but they're all local people. You know, we've checked them out. A lot of them have history of police records. And so I don't think it really helped them to find out who killed, but who knows? I don't know. I think to me, it's significant in the fact that it's so detailed and it kind of corroborates some of the other stories that have been told of what happened.
Girl, real talk. This whole it's new year, time to reinvent myself trash is not the vibe for 2024. You can find someone who loves you for you, as you are. You don't need to read a stack of self-help books, only eat sad salads, or start meditating at 5 a.m. to be ready for dating. So yeah, my advice is to download Bumble and find someone who embraces you the way you are right now. Let me know how it goes.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
Yeah, if there was deviation in anything that she had said, I would use that as a red flag. But because what she's saying is falling in line with the other narratives that are being told, it's just validating what's being said and what the situation is. Now, As for the other individuals whose names were mentioned, I mean, the first thing I would do is have run background checks on them and see what their current situations are and what they have going on in their own personal lives. Because if law enforcement is not investigating them or bringing them in for different things, I mean, if I was a cop, I would bring them in for an interview and say, hey, listen, tell me what you know about this and we'll cut you a deal on that. Just use it as leverage. But I don't think, and I've said it to you guys before, that this has been handled appropriately from the law enforcement side since day one. There's too many holes. There's too much work not being done. And I don't know if it's just because it's a smaller agency and they have other stuff going on, or they're just going to let this fall to the wayside. But there's so much work that needs to be done that has not been done. And even after all of these years, all of these witnesses should be re-interviewed, just to go ahead and see, does anyone know anything else? Has anyone heard anything else? Because even if someone hears something, a lead is a lead, a tip is a tip. You have to take it, you have to follow it. And if it brings you to a dead end, it brings you to a dead end. But you're not going to know what's going to happen until you hit the dead end.
Yeah, and we know that they're looking at this a lot closer now, and they're putting more effort into it. You know, whether or not it has anything to do with the 9.5 years, I think there's just a lot more focus on this case now, and we hope that they are doing all this stuff, and we hope they are following the right breadcrumb trails and following up on leads. But it's kind of tough after almost 10 years to kind of reverse engineer an investigation, because at this point you got to wait for someone to literally come out and say, I did it. And if that person, they can corroborate that, then that's great. But if not, then it's like all these other theories that have been floating around, they're still valid until you find out what the true story is. And you gotta investigate them. I think they've kind of ruled out a lot of it, but this particular one I thought was very interesting because it was so close after the disappearance. And she didn't have time. She didn't have the benefit like we do now, like 9.5 years later, where there's so much information, because there's been a lot of podcasts done on this thing. We did a TV show about it. There's been multiple podcasts on it. Crime Watch Daily's done it. There's a lot of people have done shows about Molly and Colt. So it's not like we're the only ones who are putting out this information. So it's not like she had the benefit of waiting 9 years and then they talked to her. And then she would say she'd have all that information, that all those theories and rumors and stuff like that to kind of draw from. This was right after.
And also before any of the media, because all of the interest was sparked when Joe Russell was arrested and taken off as sheriff. That's when the media started getting involved. But before that, there was no media. In fact, Joe Russell had told the news reporter that I interviewed that those kids were runaways and there was no story. He literally said there's no story here. So there was no media. So where would she have gotten these details? Where would she have gotten this information from?
Yeah, and it's not like it's indicated in police reports where she went ahead and filed records requests to see if anything's going to get turned over. It's not public knowledge. It's one of those things where you have to see it for yourself to be able to describe it to the degree that she did. Has anyone spoken with her since this interview?
I don't know. They could have, but I don't know. I think they've discounted it and they used that story, that
personal situation.
Exactly. And we can't even verify that. We appreciate you taking a look at that tape as always,
Of course.
and your expertise. It's good to have someone outside of this investigation. That's the way we're looking at this stuff, and from the outside in. And we've talked to a lot of other law enforcement and experts and stuff like that, and they're all kind of scratching their heads as well. So it's good to get at least some sort of verification or another opinion. And I think that's the biggest thing about this case. Is, I said it before, is if someone finds out they have cancer, the first thing the doctor says, first thing they tell you to do is go get a second opinion. Sometimes go get a third opinion. Until you can kind of really vet out what's wrong with you, you want to make sure you have all your options on the table. That's what we're doing here. Is making sure we have all the options on the table, that the information that's been thrown out there has been explored, looked at, not only by the people that are investigating it, but outside people, because it has been close to 10 years. And so there are things that need to be relooked at.
Yeah, and the great thing about that is with all of the experts you have involved is that over the course of 10 years, there's so many technological advancements that have been made. Not even just what you can do in the field. It comes down to even techniques that law enforcement uses, even to something to interviewing someone, how to elicit information. If you do a comparative study in the past 10 years of what used to be done during even interviews and interrogations, things that have worked before and things that haven't, different techniques. Like there was a technique called the Reed technique where it was definitely used 10, 15 years ago. But if you look it up right now, the Reed technique is actually under fire per se in the law enforcement community because there's a high probability of eliciting false confessions. So
Can you explain that a little bit, the retake thing, just for our audience so they understand what it is?
Yeah, so it's a type of interview technique which uses a thematic approach to go ahead and elicit information during an interview. Because I think what a lot of people confuse too is that there's definitely a difference between interviewing and an interrogation. An interview is where the interviewer, law enforcement, or the expert will really only do about 10% of the talking and just pose questions. And the person being interviewed, and the witness, the victim, whoever that person is, does about 90% of the talking, because the whole idea is we want to get information from them. Whereas the opposite, in an interrogation, the law enforcement individual is doing about 90% of the talking. You did this, you were here, blah, 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 and whatever information they have. And then the victim or suspect is going to go ahead and provide 10% of the talking. There's even a comparative analysis between the location, where an interview will be in a safe, comfortable environment, maybe out in the public. I know when I do interviews, sometimes I'll go to Dunkin' Donuts or a diner and I'll buy lunch or coffee for the person I'm meeting with. So it's just a casual conversation, kind of like what we're having now, versus in an interrogation, you want someone in a room with no windows, maybe the double-sided mirror in the police station. It's cold, it's not comfortable. The chairs aren't comfortable. You're getting maybe a glass of water, and that's it. So it comes down to optics and specs of you get more with honey than you do with vinegar. And when you're using the read technique, whether you're a law enforcement professional or not, and you're attending the courses, and obviously you have to attend a course to be trained in this process. I mean, I did this training, I want to say back in 2011. I did a 5-day course in New York City and got the piece of paper and the certification, but it's a thematic approach. You go ahead and you ask questions pertaining to themes and topics, and you elicit information on the basis of a scripted interview. But if studies are being done now, and you can go online and look it up, that a lot of the times there are false confessions being given on the basis of the technique that's being used. So agencies are stepping away from using that, and they're seeking out different forensic interview types to go ahead and be substituted for it.
Fascinating. It's fascinating. So you're learning. I mean, that's the whole point of this thing, is you have to learn what works and what doesn't work. It's no different from science. It's a trial and error.
Absolutely. I'll use the polygraph as an example. I mean, when the polygraph first came out, it was the analog machine that most people see online, where it's the big box on the table, and the piece of paper is just rolling out, and you see the needles moving up and down. Well, at that point in time, you were just measuring 3 things. You were measuring sweat gland activity, your heart rate, and breathing. And bear in mind, you had one piece of paper coming out. Let's say I was an examiner back in the day and I was scoring that chart and I spilled my cup of coffee on the charts. I go, oh shit. Well, now I've got nothing to score. I can't photocopy this. I have no data now. Whereas now we have a computer-based digital machine where we are still measuring your heart rate, your sweat gland activity, and your blood pressure. But now I can go ahead and put a pulse ox on you. It's the same pulse ox that everyone was wearing during COVID to check their oxygen level in their blood. I'm using the same thing now on a polygraph instrument to go ahead and determine the level of oxygen in your blood when answering a question. There's also now seat sensors to see if someone is conducting or using countermeasures physiologically to go ahead and change their results. So just like with technology, there's an advancement across the board. So it's not just computer-based or tests or scans. It like I said, it comes down to interviewing, and it comes down to making sure that you're doing your job to the best of your ability with regards to the most up-to-date techniques. And in this situation, you could have had an investigator assigned to this case 10 years ago. But if you have new eyes on it now, I mean, there's going to be a difference. You may get an officer that comes into an agency that's maybe 23, 24 years old, and he's motivated, he's hungry, he wants to work, he wants to solve his first case or second case. Let someone else take a look at it. Fresh eyes always works.
Yeah. And then as an investigative tool, because, we've spoken to a lot of law enforcement, and obviously polygraph is not admissible in a court of law, and
not always,
but everybody uses it. It's like a baseline. Can you speak to that? Why are they using it as a baseline?
Yeah, well, the polygraph is admissible in one state right now, and that's New Mexico. With regards to federal court, it's admissible in all federal courts. I actually have a case where I did a test for a fishing tournament, and my polygraph was actually entered into the complaint into court as an exhibit, and also with immigration court, you can use it. But all federal jurisdiction, any type of case, you can submit it for that. And then most of the states around the country are that if the prosecutor and the defense attorney agree to let it into evidence, you can absolutely get it admitted in. Now, with regards to why or how it's used or for what purposes, there's so many different variations and reasonings where people want to go ahead and, yes, they want to establish a baseline, but it's not necessarily a baseline. It's developing an idea or finding out, did so-and-so actually do this crime? Because from an attorney's perspective, if you have a client that says, okay, I didn't do this, or I wasn't even there when the alleged crime happened, individuals will take a polygraph test to go ahead and show the fact of A, they weren't there, or B, they didn't do the actual crime. Counsel can then go ahead and take it to the prosecutor's offices and say, listen, here's a polygraph test. These are the results. If you're willing to accept the results, then let's either A, work out a deal so my client is in charge, or B, if you're still going to pursue this, I want this entered into evidence. So I wouldn't really necessarily consider it a baseline. It's just more finding out of, did it actually happen or did it not happen, and how can we take the results and move forward?
Fascinating. Do you think what's on the horizon for like polygraphs? I mean, when you shoot down the road as far as technology and stuff like that, what's the next thing that is going to help us determine whether or not people are lying or not?
Well, it'll be beneficial if everyone stops lying, but if everyone stops lying, I no longer have a job. So it's kind of recession proof, but not at the same time. But with regards to the instrument itself, is constantly evolving because there are different studies and the manufacturers are doing their own internal work on figuring out different ways to go ahead and monitor deception. I mean, one technique, which is not actually using the polygraph, but there's something called an fMRI, a functional MRI. So it's the same way someone goes to the hospital and gets an MRI for their back, their knee, or whatever it is. You can actually do a functional MRI of the brain. And there are studies that have been done, and the research is online, where I could put you into an MRI tube, Rob, and ask you different questions and watch different parts of your brain light up, whether or not you're telling the truth or a lie. Now, it's a little expensive to be going ahead and having someone go to the hospital every time and run an MRI to run a polygraph exam. But that's just showing like studies that have been done previously to show the medical workings of the brain with regards to deception and not deception. The interview techniques, as we talked about, those are constantly evolving because different people are doing the research and it's being quality controlled. Data is being replicated by multiple people to show the accuracy of it. And it's just an ongoing thing. We've had the polygraph for over 100 years now. Like I said, we went from analog to digital, and from digital, who knows where we go now.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. Well, I think it's only a matter of time, obviously with technology, as soon as the cost comes down and it's mass produced, then it'll be more ready available.
It really is readily available because the instrument manufacturers, it's not like they have to build an instrument every single time someone orders one. It comes down to the amount of examiners ultimately and whether or not they need their equipment. Whereas, like, I know for me, right now, it's myself and one other examiner on staff, but we have, I want to say, like 5 different instruments amongst the 2 of us. Do I need 5? No, I'm one person, but I always like to have backups in case something happens. Other examiners only work for law enforcement agencies, so their department will give them their equipment. But again, it comes down to what the manufacturers want to do and how much effort they want to put into increasing their product. Do they want to continue with the advancements? There are manufacturers that are, I don't want to say not as strong, but not as out there per se in the polygraph environment. And there are other ones that are much stronger. And I'm not talking about the equipment itself. I'm talking just about branding, comparing apples to oranges. But it comes down to just personal preference of the examiner as well of what instrument they want to use.
Fascinating. Last question I have for you is that does the polygraph affect someone who's a drug addict differently than someone who's not?
Define drug addict.
Well, someone who's used, like in this case, a lot of people in this area use methamphetamine. So they're either currently addicted to methamphetamine and currently using, or they're recovered from it and have used it in the past.
Okay, so if they're currently using meth, all illegal drugs affect the polygraph test in some sort of capacity, even marijuana. And the biggest argument I get whenever I speak to someone on the phone that wants to book a polygraph exam, I always ask them, do you use marijuana or any illegal drugs? And then I've got people telling me, oh, marijuana is legal or whatever it is. And I said, I don't give a crap if it's legal. I'm asking, do you use it or not? Because if you're using marijuana, it affects your autonomic nervous system, your breathing, your heart rate, your sweat gland activity. All 3 things of which I'm measuring. So we tell everyone you can't have marijuana for at least 3 days prior because I want it out of their system as much as possible. But obviously, if you're going to smoke every single day, there's going to be remnants, but at least you're not showing up high to my office. Like something like cocaine, has to be out of your system for at least a week. When you're talking about meth now, you can do meth one time, let's say 15 years ago, and it could still affect the polygraph that you take tomorrow because it chemically messes with the brain and the area of the brain that I'm measuring, whether or not something is telling the truth or someone's telling a lie. And I've had it where I've gone ahead, and I'm thinking about one specific case now where I ran a polygraph on an individual, and I had known this individual personally for at least 3 years at that point because he had referred another client to me, and we had worked on a couple of investigations, and he needed to take a test. And at one point I said to myself, I was like, you know what? There's no way that he's going to fail this test. Like, it's just, I can't see it. And if he did, would it have affected our personal relationship? Probably. But long story short, I ran the test, and I'm looking at everything, and he came up inconclusive. And this is after 3 polygraph tests. So I said to him, I said, listen, you're inconclusive. Like, do me a favor, go home, get a good night's sleep. I want you to come back tomorrow. I'm not going to charge you for the test. I want to run it again. Came back, had a good night's sleep, had breakfast, no issues. And after 3 charts, he was inconclusive again. So I sat him down in my conference room, and I was like, dude, what the hell is going on? And he's like, I have no idea. I don't know why it's coming up like this. And I had already given him a drug test to show that there's nothing in his system. So it's not like he tried taking something to beat the exam chemically. And at that point, I said to him, I said, here's my question for you. I said, I've only known you 3 years. I only know what's been going on. I said, prior to us meeting, I said, have you ever done any of these drugs? And he actually said to me, he's like, yeah, well, I did this one. And I said, well, that's the reason why you're failing. He's like, what do you mean? I said, I don't care how long ago it was. It comes down to the fact that you did this specific drug, and this is why you're inconclusive. And I actually pulled out like copies of the brain from like fMRI studies and showing him the different parts of the brain. And then I brought up one where I had to show him what meth does to the brain and what it does chemically to a person's body. So it doesn't matter if you use meth once or you use it repetitively, it's still going to affect the test. And obviously I won't know anything until I test an individual person at that time. But in this situation where everyone lives, if everyone's using meth, A, they're probably doing it together, and B, repetitive usage is not going to deem them quality to take an exam.
Wow. Lisa, this has been awesome. You really helped us understand a lot of this, how deception works and how people giving statements, where they're coming from. We can't thank you enough for your time. You've been amazing.
Yeah, and then
of course.
And also how people are being interviewed, and how law enforcement are reinventing and discovering new methods on how to get the truth out of people the right way.
Yeah, there's definitely a right way and a wrong way. And it comes down to continuing education, making sure that these officers are sufficiently trained. That just because what someone learned in the police academy 25 years ago isn't necessarily what was being done now. I mean, if you look at just how law enforcement handled situations in the 70s, I mean, I live in New York. So in the 70s, NYPD was going around bashing people's heads in, collapsible batons, brass knuckles, whatever you needed to do. You pulled that crap now here in New York, you're done. You're on the cover of the New York Post and the Times, and you won't have a job in the morning.
Yeah.
So even physical police surveillance has changed. Whereas if it's definitely different of what you're being taught, you have to be on the ball. And I think that's a big fault of agencies, not just where they are and where I am. It comes down to just overall the general idea that there needs to be a constant continuing education. There needs to be constant training and effectively training, because you can go for training and then either forget about it, or there's no follow through. There's no accountability. It's almost like a checks and balances thing, where if you're going to send an officer to training, at least let them implement it and watch someone, or I guess like an integrity control officer, making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
But it's laziness and lack of resources.
Yeah. I think lack of resources is a big problem.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you for your time.
Of course, guys. Absolutely. Anything for you.
All righty.
Thank you, Lisa. Take
care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Next time on Partners in True Crime.
Our investigation into the case of Molly Miller and Colt Haynes continues. We're going to be sorting through tips, and we are going to be speaking to new experts in law enforcement and the legal field from around the country, who will hopefully help us unravel this mystery.
If you or anyone you know is suffering from a methamphetamine addiction, please contact the American Meth Addiction Hotline.
If you or anyone you know has been the victim of sexual abuse, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
For any tips relating to the disappearance of Molly Miller and Colt Haynes, please contact 833-4-MOLLY and Colt, and they will be directed to the proper law enforcement agency.
All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content. Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and listen to Vi's original song, Take Me Back, written for Molly Miller.